let's move to another important part of our meeting is today's presentation. So I would like to invite today's guest speaker, Mark Cabaj. So a little introduction about Mark. Mark Cabaj, working together to achieve collective impact. Mark is president of the consulting company From Here to There and an associate of Tamarack and Institute for Community Engagement. Mark's current focus is on developing practical ways to understand, plan, and evaluate efforts to address complex issues. This includes challenges such as neighborhood renewal, poverty and homelessness, community safety, educational achievements, and health. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about using collective impact approach for system change effort. So Mark, and let's welcome Mark.
Hi, Anwar, thank you for that. Thanks for the introduction, and hello everyone. I appreciated participating in your annual general meeting. Those are few and far between nowadays, or at least I haven't attended many, so it's nice to get back into that groove. And it does sound like you had a good year despite it all. I don't know if a lot of organizations can say that, so congratulations. I don't have that long to talk about it today, Anwar. I understand I have about 15 to 20 minutes, which usually it takes me that long to find my car keys. So I'm going to really focus and try and do a good job here. I will say that I'm also, Sheila, I was glad when Sheila asked if I would speak to this. I'm familiar with this topic. I was involved in one of the first collective impact efforts in Canada from 1997 to the year 2000 in Waterloo region, when we ran a project called Opportunities 2000 to reduce poverty in Waterloo region. And that led to the creation of the Tamarack Institute, for which I was vice president for 10 years, and we supported dozens of collective impact efforts. And even though I left Tamarack in 2011 to work more on my own, more specifically in the field, I am connected to the Tamarack Institute and have watched with amazement and participated in some of these projects, the evolution of the collective impact approach in North America, and I would say all over the world. Now, I don't know, I think that we're going to work with this in a way that I just asked for the slides to be switched because I don't think I can move them by myself. So we'll go to the next slide. I am based here in Edmonton, and so know a little bit of the Seniors Council. And in fact, Sheila will remember with Peter Fade and some others about 8 years ago, did a little bit of work with the council. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to describe what collective impact is, give you some examples of where it's achieved results, and say a little bit about the evidence base behind that approach. And then I'll just summarize by where you can go for more if you want additional information. And then I understand we have a little bit of time for questions and answers. So we'll go to the next slide. Here's the basic idea. And this, this idea is not new to anyone here. A very smart group in the United States called the Foundation Strategy Group wrote a paper in 2011 called Collective Impact. And they started the paper by saying, everyone has always wanted to solve complex issues in communities at scale. We want needle moving impacts. We want to be able to say something got improved by 20% in Edmonton, not just that a good program did something. The challenge is that we work in a lot of fragmentation. We have individual programs, funders who ask for different things, organizations doing good work but working on their own. And so we have fragmented responses that lead to fragmented impact. Everyone doing their own thing, but it not necessarily adding up to the sum of its parts or more. So we'll go to the next slide. They then said, well, really, it doesn't take much thought to come up with the idea that we should be working more collectively. And that is to acknowledge that some of the things that we're trying to deal with are very connected. They're hyper connected. You can't really just deal with good seniors outcomes and well-being without understanding the pandemic or understanding what's happening with oil and gas in Alberta, right? All of these things are somehow connected. If they're connected, they need cross-sector alignment. No one sector organization can impose a solution on their own to get better outcomes. Organizations should be actively coordinating their efforts and sharing lessons learned. And we all should be working towards the same goal. So again, this isn't counterintuitive, but it is countercultural, quite frankly. So none of this stuff seems crazy on paper, but it doesn't often happen in practice. But it has happened a number of times that have led to some tremendous results. And this is where they began their paper and what I would now call is the collective impact movement. So we'll go to the next slide.
Mark, you should be able to advance the slides yourself.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Let me try that then. It says, oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Tim will go one more. So thank you, Tim. The big story, Strive Cincinnati. All movements need founding stories. And this founding story was in Strive Cincinnati. They have hundreds of organizations in 70 partnerships working on improving outcomes from children from cradle to career. And they have something like 54 different indicator goals with indicators for each of those. And they came together to say, we're going to work together to orchestrate our efforts to get these kinds of outcomes. It was quite an impressive feat in terms of the sheer scale. It is Connecticut and Northern Kentucky. And so there's dozens of school districts. But they created something called the Backbone Organization and a partnership that over 10 years has seen improvements on almost all the indicators and tremendous improvements. And I'm going to lean forward so I can see them here. Preparation for school outcomes have improved, test scores, graduation rates, and college enrollment, and college readiness retention rates and graduation rates in colleges. They track kids from kindergarten to high school now in the school system. They know where all of them are as a collective. So Tim, let's say you and I were working in a school board. In one school board, we would be able to have access to find files of a kid who went into another school board, but maybe was in our school board for just a little bit of time. Everyone knows what these kids are doing. Tremendous, tremendous story. It really is a well-known case study in the United States, but this was the baseline case study they used to create a paper that said collective impact. If you peel away the onion and look at the secret sauce behind this, there's 5 key ingredients to why this group was able to do this. So ingredient number 1. So they actually 5. They saw a shift from fragmented responses to collective responses. Number 1, specialized agendas. They said, let's create a common agenda. I'm going to go over that one pretty quickly. They said, fragmented measurements. Everyone's measuring their own things. Let's actually start working on shared measurements. Let's measure and report on the same thing. Independent activities, everyone doing their own thing, often quite well. How do we ensure that our stuff is mutually reinforcing? Number 3, connecting once in a while to find out what was going on, to be in continuous communication so they could orchestrate in real time. And finally, forgoing the idea that all the stuff can happen on the side of its desk, that requires some kind of backbone support. Again, these ideas are not counterintuitive, but they are countercultural. So let's go through each of these in detail. And I'm still learning the advance and see what each of them means. Common agenda. This means getting everyone on the same page about what is the agenda, the challenge that we're trying to address. Francis Ford Coppola, I don't know if any of you remember who that is. He is a director, and he's directed some very good movies like Godfather 1, and he's directed some movies for which he should be put in prison, including Godfather 3. And he was actually interviewed and asked what was the difference between a good movie and a bad movie. He said, oh, that's easy. In a good movie, you know it's going to be a good movie because everyone's making the same movie. Right? Everyone's got the same plot line. So this is really what the common agenda is. And it's not that easy. Even if it's counterintuitive, it's not counterintuitive, counterculture, it's bloody difficult to do. What is the challenge we're all trying to address? Can we get a pretty roughly right, clear goal about what we're trying to change? Can we develop a portfolio of key strategies that align with that agenda? Can we agree to some common principles or simple rules to guide our work? Almost like improv. I don't know if you've ever done improv, but you're given some common rules and principles within which to work, because there's a lot of improvisation, but you do have guidelines. And can you craft an approach to evaluation that deliberately and systematically tracks progress towards this common agenda? So that's number 1. Number 2, mutually reinforcing activities. Not only do we agree on key outcomes, but we focus less on specialization and more on orchestration. looking for complementary yet sometimes joined up strategies to achieve outcomes. This is sort of interesting because we're always focused on the end goal. This says we actually have to have lateral vision, saying what are we doing that supports or diminishes what someone else is doing? And how do we create platforms so we can actually talk about being more than the sum of our parts and being very systematic about watching what others are doing and making sure we add rather than diminish. Let's go through the third one, shared measurement. The idea here, you've all heard that phrase. I don't believe it entirely. I think it's a bit overdone, but treasure what you measure and then measure what you treasure. That if you measure something, it will become the focus of something. And measurement can be awfully difficult and dangerous. I've done a lot of work in this area, but the idea is pretty simple. Agree on what progress means and track that and use it. I worked with a group in St. John, New Brunswick, who every meeting, every week, they looked at their needles on poverty. They had 23 indicators of poverty. Every week they looked at them, and they didn't change every week. They changed about every 6 months or a year. They could track them, but every week they looked at those needles and said, we're trying to make change on those indicators, be they social isolation or high school graduation rates. Number 4 out of 5, and then a couple of examples. Okay, I'm still learning this system here. Tim, I might get you just to advance. It's not responding to me. Just so we don't waste time. Oh, thank you. Strive Cincinnati, for example, is sort of the nectar of the gods. They are the ones that everyone tries to mimic. It's kind of dangerous to try and do it because they've got their school system. So they have more data than some small countries, and they're able to produce it quite a bit. So they actually have just dozens and dozens of indicators that they all track according to their partnership group of what needles they're trying to achieve, and they report out on that annually. So let's actually go to number 4 now. Tim, we'll go to the next one. Continuous communication, again, not counterintuitive, but countercultural. It is amazing when you look at these collective impact groups, the ingenuity with which they approach the challenge of keeping each other's engaged in their work and learning what's going on, even to the extent, check this out, where one working group working on one strategy writes the evaluation report or the update report for another group. Now, why would that make any difference? So Sheila, let's say I was supporting a group and you were supporting a group and we would write each other's report. That means I have to learn about what you folks are doing. And you have to learn about what I'm doing, right? You get into someone else's head. And for the person for whom you're writing the report, you got to be bloody clear about what's going on because you can't just sort of wing it and write it out. So it's endless, folks, the ingenuity with which people are trying to stay engaged and deeply understanding of each other's work. So lots of innovation in this area. We'll go one more, Tim. And then the backbone organization. This one is anyone who's done collaborative work like Sheila and Tim and others for a long period of time will know this. This stuff doesn't happen on the side of their desk. People have to make sure that the whole process moves along. And I'm going to read Jay Connor's quote. He's one of my favorite thinkers about this work. He uses the metaphor of a general contractor, like a manager at a construction site who attends to the whole building while carpenters, plumbers, and electricians come and go. The support app of the backbone organization keep the collaborative process moving along, even though the participants might change. Stuff matters about what gets done, when, by whom, etc. And someone's got to support the mutually reinforcing activities and support all these backbone functions, including vision and strategy, shared measurements, building public will, advancing policy, and mobilizing funding. So, deathly simple ideas, principles more than anything, quite frankly, because the manifestation of those principles, how people do it, varies quite a bit. I'm going to quickly go through with you now with Tim a couple of quick examples of where people have seen impact. And they're all over the place, folks. You think of a social issue, probably if you Google it, someone and attach a collective impact to it, you'll probably find an example. I'm going to give you 5 of them here now. We'll go to the next one, Tim. So number 1, in Tillamook County in 1990, I believe it was, they had the second highest teen pregnancy rate in all of Oregon in that county. 10 years later, it was reduced by 80% because of collective impact work. School boards, faith-based organizations, health centers all came together with the collective impact framework and they reduced it by 80% in 10 years. It now has the lowest or second lowest in the whole state. That was all because of a deliberate collective impact approach. Next one. Collective impact approach in Karelia. Big policy push in Karelia, in Finland in general, I should say, to reduce heart disease amongst the population across the country. And Finland's not huge, but big enough that you need a national response. But the Karelia region that had an extra higher rate of heart disease incidence decided to complement the federal strategy with a collective impact approach and dramatically reduce protective risk factors of heart disease and overall heart disease in about a 15-year period. Possible. Next one. The way home in New York State. This is statewide, so this is not so much regional, but it's regional stuff embedded in a statewide New York State approach. But working across the state in the collective impact efforts, they reduced arrests, kids in custody, and crime recidivism in 62 counties, to the extent that they led to reform juvenile justice systems in the states and were able to redeploy money because they closed down so many facilities. It's just a raving success story. I think one or two more, Tim. One in Edmonton. It's a very small case study of this, and there are more case studies of this in Edmonton, but I don't know if many of you have heard of 211 and the 24/7 Crisis Diversion Project. A small number of organizations got together to dramatically reduce the number of calls from distressed persons on the streets that were going to EMS and the police EPS. Right, a lot of people in trouble, and you would get taken to the Royal Alexander, go to the police. They turned the curve on those calls to both those institutions using a miniature version of the collective impact model. Now, it hardly has addressed all the vulnerability on the streets, but at least that vulnerability is now deflected from the EMS and EPS because those aren't really crime situations, nor are they deep health situations. They're more overall well-being situations. So, micro case study from Edmonton. I think I'm going to show you one more. One of the big ones in Canada, and particularly in Alberta, using a version of the collective impact approach. Canada, amongst many of the, North America in particular, but Australia and New Zealand as well, and Alberta specifically has done quite well in reducing homelessness. Again, you wouldn't think it half the time walking on the streets and feeling there's a lot of people in tough situations, but Medicine Hat has actually managed to reduce functional homelessness to 0. If you're on a street in Medicine Hat, it's something like within 2 weeks or a month, you're in an apartment now. Doesn't mean you're not at risk and vulnerable and need supports, but you're not on the streets anymore. That means using a collective impact approach. So let's go. I think I'm almost done here. Anwar, do I have 2 more minutes?
Yep.
Yeah. So now these are all good case studies, and we've all got good stories. A group out of the United States actually went deep into 25 collective impact stories and found that I think it's 22 or 20 out of 25 actually made a contribution to changing population level outcomes. Everyone, we're used to programmatic outcomes, right? A program, good outcomes. Can we create population level outcomes where they all add up to moving the needle at a community-wide level? This report says there's evidence that that's possible if you follow the approach systematically, robustly, and over time. Next 2 slides, and then we'll finish. Here's the kicker though. Collective impact is a workout. You really have to want to do it because the default to old patterns is so powerful. It's easier to work in fragmented things, silos and approaches. The urgency has to be high. We need influential champions, and there needs to be adequate resources. If those don't exist, it doesn't become self-refueling, and it kind of slows down and just putters out. We've all been part of those processes. So some questions to ask yourself. Do you really want to move the needle on a population level outcome? Do you accept the reality that a long-term investment is required? Do we believe cross-sector engagement is essential? Are we committed to using measurable data? And are we committed to having community members as partners and producers of impact? If you're interested in more, here's the last slide, I promise. There is oodles of stuff, including the Collective Impact Forum, which is incredibly rich with people from all over the world contributing to their own stories, endless resources and endless case studies. And Tamarack has also an enviable website as well. That is it, folks. That was a snack more than anything. One could talk for days about this. Again, I may have found my car keys by now, given that if that was my other task, but I managed to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. I think we're over to questions now, Anwar.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mark. As someone who always carries the flag of collaboration and partnership with pride, and look into some of the key ingredients of the working together and collective impact. This is first time for me that I saw a whole ingredient list together. So very well put. So thank you for doing that. Okay. I would like to open the floor for a few questions. I think we have a little bit of time. So please raise your hand. I'm monitoring the whole screen, all your beautiful faces. I can see that. So if you have any question, please.
Anwar, we should also say Sheila and Ted have the slides, so they will go out after in a PDF format.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, this was one of the questions in the chat I received. So thank you for letting us know. No question at all. So I'll ask because I hold the mic, so why not?
Sure.
Yeah. So looking at your ingredients to be, impactful, collective impact, like what is your biggest battle? Like you have these 5 or 7 lists where you feel the most resistance, where people do not want to work together.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is we are so designed, our systems are so focused on project-oriented interventions. You get a little bit of money to work on a discrete issue by one organization. So it's really hard to buck that trend, to say, well, no, we actually want to tackle multiple outcomes with multiple partners over time. And so it is difficult to do this approach in a project world. I don't know if you've, Anwar, I've heard a phrase that we're all pilot project junkies. Like we like the one-off pilot projects and we think projects lead to transformation and change. They don't. So the challenge is it takes a very sophisticated group to weave together. It's very difficult to weave together multiple resources, knit them together over time in a way that says, I know the system wants me to do project-oriented, short-term, one organization silo projects, but we're going to weave that together to make it something more than that. So you're balancing feeding the system, right? Like making sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's while saying, thanks for those ingredients. I'm going to try and make something bigger. And all projects are fake, not fake. They're artificial. They're just small pieces of time to try to get something done. So how do you keep constantly reweaving piecemeal funding, piecemeal timelines into a greater package? It's tiring, but the proof is in the pudding. Some of the groups have been able to do it.
Thank you. And any other?
I have a comment more than a question, Anwar. It's Mary.
Mary, please go ahead.
Mark, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I personally have done quite a bit of reading on collective impact, and the thing that I struggle with the most is the idea of sustainability when you're talking about piecemeal pilot projects and that, and the measurement piece. Like it's almost as if you get all gung-ho and you almost forget about the outcomes and the measurement, and it's so vitally important. And it's a comment. Am I hitting a mark there? How important that measurement piece is?
Yeah, and I'll admit, Mary, I don't love. I have a battle in my own life, and my most of my job is evaluating of complex change initiatives. I kind of find that. First of all, people look for the bottom line measures, like how many people's lives have improved. And of course, we all want that or some version of that. But it's all, if we want, I'm going to use another phrase, Mary.
Okay.
In order to get population level incomes, we have to move from a project mentality. Here's my opinion. And Karen Pittman said it really nice. Programmatic interventions help people beat the odds. Systemic interventions change their odds. People are vulnerable because of systemic issues, right? Laws, cultures, what does a good life for seniors mean? Like we're all relearning what that means. Everything's under siege now. So it's about system change. Projects don't deliver transformation on popular level changes. So first of all, measurement has to move from a project mentality to saying, how are we shifting systems? Can we start shifting policies and structures and mental models in the direction of change? And it's the accumulation of many systemic changes that leads to transformation. So first of all, we're measuring the wrong thing. And number two, probably most things that are meaningful are not easily quantified alone. And there's a great principle called no narratives without numbers, no numbers without narratives. You can't understand the meaning of a number without a narrative, right? Without qualitative information, depth, nuance, meaning. And often case studies and qualitative information without quantitative information also leaves you kind of half blind in a way. So we need both mixed methods on tracking progress, and the thing we're measuring, has to move from immediate program level results to can we shift systems over time. It's a bit more complex than that, but I do agree that we do conventional measurement practices and worldviews trip us up quite a bit.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Any other question, please? I have a side question, Mark, meanwhile, if somebody else wants to ask us, while we were talking about this measurement and everything. So the gap in what and how you measure, isn't it one of the barrier of having this collective, winning programs? Because how we measure as we deliver our services versus how the individuals who are impacted, they measure the impact, and then the agencies who fund them, everybody is measuring their own things, and there is a huge gap. So
I agree.
So this is another big challenge.
Yeah, I think that's where maybe it would have been better had there been a diagram that showed the overlap of all of those elements, because the idea is if you have a common agenda, you still need to figure out from multiple perspectives, what does a good outcome mean? And one of the things that's happened, it's been happening for 15 years now, but in the last 3 years, it's really exploded, is having people with lived experience or voices of experience weighing in on saying what a measurement is, because what might work from an administrative accounting point of view, particularly from a centralized agency, this is it. Big systems like reductionist indicators. But if you're sitting in a big system and you're accumulating shared measurements from lots of different people, you're getting a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of reality that arrives late and is decontextualized, right? So big systems almost have an impossibility of seeing real change. So how do you shared measurement across multiple partners that gives them saying, we all agree this looks like an outcome, and then you translate that into some big system to at least ensure that they're fed. But it needs 360-degree participation to come up with those shared measurements.
Thank you. I have another question in chat box, Mark. What advice do you have for the community seniors sector related to collective impact perspective?
Have you heard, that, Anwar, the quote that the early bird gets the worm? I like a better quote. The second mouse gets the cheese. And there are so many people who've worked on this now that on the collective impact forum, there's lots of lessons learned, lots of things that people haven't done well. So in some ways, the seniors community coming to this, it will benefit because a lot of other people have made a ton of mistakes, including every project that I've ever been involved in. So number one, go to the collective impact forum and find out what the latest and best thinking is about collective impact, number one. Number two, I know there's other collective impact examples across Canada involving seniors. I just read before the AGM a quick one in Ottawa. Find out what they're doing as well. And then to say, now, what's our approach? What do we think is our approach? What could we learn from the others? And then just stand on the shoulders of others who have done a little bit of work in advance of you. I wouldn't start from scratch. There's been too many lessons learned.
Great. Thank you.
Great advice. Thanks, Mark.
And it's an absolute pleasure meeting you and giving face to the name Mark as well. So we'll continue to collaborate and work together.